Section 3 of Selection from the Poetry of Saadi Shirazi, edited by Nathan Haskell Dole and Bell Walker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Gulistan, or Rose Garden, Part 2. Story. A king had reached the close of his life and had no heir to succeed him. He made a will that they should place the royal crown on the head of the first person who might enter the gates of the city in the morning, and should confide the government to him. It happened that the first person who entered the city gate was a beggar, who throughout his whole life had collected scrap after scrap, and sewn rag upon rag. The pillars of the state and ministers of the late king executed his will, and bestowed on him the country and the treasure. The dervish carried on the government for a time, when some of the great nobles turned their necks from obeying him, and the princes of the surrounding countries rose up on every side to oppose him, and arrayed their armies against him. In short, his troops and his subjects were thrown into confusion, and a portion of his territory departed from his possession. The dervish was in a state of dejection at this circumstance, when one of his old friends, who was intimate with him in the time of his poverty, returned from a journey, and finding him in this exalted position, said, "Thanks be to God, may he be honoured and glorified, that thy lofty destiny has aided thee, and thy auspicious fortune has led thee on, so that thy rose has come forth from the thorn, and the thorn from thy foot, and thou hast arrived at this rank. Surely with calamity comes rejoicing." Couplet. The bud now blossoms, withered now is found. The tree now naked, now with leaves is crowned. He replied, "O brother, condole with me, for there is no room for felicitation. When thou sawest me, I was distressed for bread, and now I have the troubles of a world upon me." Distichs. Have we no worldly gear? 'Tis grief and pain. Have we it? Then its charms our feet enchain. Can we than this a plague more troublous find, which absent, present, still afflicts the mind? Stanza. Wouldst thou be rich? Seek but content to gain. For this a treasure is that ne'er will harm. If in thy lap some Dives riches reign, let not thy heart with gratitude grow warm. For, by the wisest, I have oft been told, the poor man's patience better is than gold. Couplet. A locust's leg, the poor ant's gift, is more than the wild ass dressed whole from Bahram's store. Footnote. Bahram, the sixth of that name, was a king of Persia called Ghor, from his fondness for hunting the wild ass. This couplet is a sort of oriental version of the widow's mite. End footnote. Story. Having become weary of the society of my friends at Damascus, I set out for the wilderness of Jerusalem, and associated with the brutes, until I was made prisoner by the Franks, who set me to work along with Jews at digging in the fosse of Tripolis, till one of the principal men of Aleppo, between whom and myself a former intimacy had subsisted, passed that way and recognized me, and said, "What state is this, and how are you living?" I replied. Stanza. From men to mountain and to wild I fled, myself to heavenly converse to betake. Conjecture now my state, that in a shed of savages I must my dwelling make. Couplet. Better to live in chains with those we love, than with the strange bid flowerets gay to move. He took compassion on my state, and with 10 dinars redeemed me from the bondage of the Franks, and took me along with him to Aleppo. He had a daughter, whom he united to me in the marriage knot, with a portion of 100 dinars. As time went on, the girl turned out of a bad temper, quarrelsome and unruly. She began to give a loose to her tongue, and to disturb my happiness, as they have said. Distichs. In a good man's house an evil wife is his hell above in this present life. From a vixen wife protect us well, save us, O God, from the pains of hell. At length she gave vent to reproaches, and said, Art thou not he whom my father purchased from the Franks' prison for 10 dinars? I replied, Yes, he redeemed me with 10 dinars, and sold me into thy hands for 100. Distichs. I've heard that once a man of high degree from a wolf's teeth and claws a lamb set free. That night its throat he severed with a knife, when thus complained the lamb's departing life. Thou from the wolf didst save me then, but now too plainly I perceive the wolf art thou. Story. One of the Syrian recluses had for years worshipped in the desert, and sustained life by feeding on the leaves of trees. The king of that region made a pilgrimage to visit him, and said, If thou thinkest fit, I will prepare a place for thee in the city that thou mayest have greater conveniences for devotion than here, and that others may be benefited by the blessing of thy prayers, and may imitate thy virtuous acts. The devotee did not assent to these words. The noble said, To oblige the king, the proper course is for thee to come into the city for a few days, and learn the nature of the place. After which, if the serenity of thy precious time suffers disturbance from the society of others, thou wilt be still free to choose. They relate that the devotee entered the city, and that they prepared for him the garden of the king's own palace, a place delightsome to the mind, and suited to tranquillize the spirit. Distichs. Like beauty's cheek, bright shone its roses red, its hyacinths, like fair ones' ringlets spread, seemed babes, which from their mother's milk ne'er drew, in winter's cold so shrinkingly they grew. Couplet. And the branches, on them grew pomegranate flowers like fire suspended there, mid verdant bowers. The king forthwith dispatched a beautiful damsel to him. Verse. A young moon, that e'en saints might lead astray, angel in form, a peacock in display, when once beheld, not hermits could retain their holy state, nor undisturbed remain. In like manner, after her, the king sent a slave, a youth of rare beauty and of graceful proportions. Stanza. Round him, who seems cupbearer, people sink. Of thirst they die, he gives them not to drink. The eyes that see him, still unsated crave, as dropsy thirsts amid the Euphrates wave. The holy man began to feed on dainties, and wear soft raiment, and to find gratification and enjoyment in fruits and perfumes, as well as to survey the beauty of the youth and of the damsel. And the wise have said, The ringlets of the beautiful are the fetters of reason, and a snare to the bird of intelligence. Couplet. In thy behoof, my heart, my faith, my intellect I vow. In truth, a subtle bird am I, the snare this day art thou. In short, the bliss of his tranquil state began to decline, as they have said. Stanza. All that exist, disciples, doctors, saints, the pure and eloquent alike, all fail when once this world's base gear their minds attaints, as flies their legs in honey vainly trail. At length the king felt a desire to visit him. He found the recluse altered in appearance from what he was before, with a florid complexion, and waxen fat, pillowed on a cushion of brocade, and the fairy-faced slave standing at his head, with a fan of peacock's feathers. The monarch was pleased at his felicitous state, and the conversation turned on a variety of subjects, till, at the close of it, the king said, Of all the people in the world I value these two sorts most, the learned and the devout. A philosophical and experienced vizier was present. He said, O king, friendship requires that thou shouldst do good to both these two orders of men. To the wise give gold, that they may study the more, and to the devout give nothing, that they may remain devout. Couplet. To the devout nor pence nor gold divide, if one receive it, seek another guide. Stanza. Kind manners, and a heart on God bestowed make up the saint, without alms begged or bread that piety bequeaths. What though no load of turquoise rings on beauty's fingers shed their ray, nor from her ear the shimmering gem depends? 'Tis beauty still, and needs not them. Stanza. O gentle dervish, blessed with mind serene, thou hast no need of alms or hermit's fare. Lady of beauteous face and graceful mien, thou well the turquoise ring and gauds canst spare. Couplet. Seek I for goods which not to me belong? Then if men call me worldly, they're not wrong. Story. In conformity with the preceding story, an affair of importance occurred to the king. He said, "If the termination of this matter be in accordance with my wishes, I will distribute so many dirhams to holy men." When his desire was accomplished, it became incumbent on him to fulfil his vow according to the conditions. He gave a bag of dirhams to one of his favourite servants, and told him to distribute them among devout personages. They say that the servant was shrewd and intelligent. He went about the whole day, and returned at night, and kissing the dirhams, laid them before the king, saying, "However much I searched for the holy men, I could not find them." The king replied, "What tale is this? I know that in this city there are 400 saints." He answered, "O Lord of the earth, the devout accept them not, and he who accepts them is not devout." The king laughed, and said to his courtiers, "Strong as my good intentions are toward this body of godly men, and much as I wish to express my favour toward them, I am thwarted by proportionate enmity and rejection of them on the part of this saucy fellow, and he has reason on his side." Couplet. When holy men accept of coin from thee, leave them, and seek some better devotee. Story. They asked a profoundly learned man his opinion as to pious bequests. He said, "If the allowance is received in order to tranquillize the mind, and obtain more leisure for devotion, it is lawful. But when people congregate for the sake of the endowment, it is unlawful." Couplet. For sacred leisure saints receive their bread, not to gain food that ease is furnished. Story. A disciple said to his spiritual guide, "What shall I do? For I am harassed by people through the frequency of their visits to me, and my precious moments are disturbed by their coming and going." He replied, "Lend to all who are poor, and demand a loan of all who are rich, and they will not come about thee again." Couplet. If Islam's van a beggar should precede, to China infidels would fly his greed. Story. A band of dissolute fellows came to find fault with a dervish, and used unwarrantable language, and wounded his feelings. He carried his complaint before the chief of his order, and said, "I have undergone such and such." His chief replied, "O son, the patched robe of the dervishes is the garment of resignation. Every one who in this garb endures not disappointment patiently is a pretender, and it is unlawful for him to wear the robe of the dervish." Couplet. A stone makes not great rivers turbid grow. When saints are vexed, their shallowness they show. Stanza. Hast thou been injured? Suffer it, and clear thyself from guilt in pardoning others' sin. O brother, since the end of all things here is into dust to moulder, be thou in like humble mould, ere yet the change begin. Story, in verse. List to my tale. In Baghdad once dispute between a flag and curtain rose. Its suit the banner, dusty and with toil oppressed, urged, and the curtain, angry, thus addressed: "Myself and thou were comrades at one school. Both now are slaves 'neath the same monarch's rule. I in his service ne'er have rested. Still, whate'er the time, I journey at his will. My foot is ever foremost in emprise. Then why hast thou more honour in men's eyes? With moon-faced slaves thy moments pass away, With jasmine-scented girls thou mak'st thy stay. I lie neglected still in servile hands. Tossed by the winds my head, my feet in bands. The threshold is my couch, the curtain said, and ne'er, like thee, to heaven raise I my head. He who exalts his neck with vain conceit hurls himself headlong from his boasted seat. Story. A pious man saw an athlete who was exasperated and infuriated, foaming at the mouth. He said, "What is the matter with this man?" Some one answered, "Such a one has abused him." "What?" said the holy man. "This contemptible fellow can lift a stone of 1,000 man's weight, yet has not the power to support a word." Stanza. Boast not thy strength or manhood while thy heart is swayed by impulse base. If man thou art, or woman, matters naught, but rather aim all mouths to sweeten, thus deserve the name of man, for manliness doth not consist in stopping others' voices with thy fist. Stanza. Though one could brain an elephant, yet he is not a man without humanity. In earth the source of Adam's sons began. Art thou not humble? Then thou art not man. Story. A king was regarding a company of dervishes contemptuously. One of them, acute enough to divine his feelings, said, "O king, we, in this world, are inferior to thee in military pomp, but enjoy more pleasure, and are equal with thee in death, and superior to thee in the day of resurrection." Distichs. The conqueror may in every wish succeed, of bread the dervish daily stands in need. But in that hour when both return to clay, nought but their winding sheet they take away. When man makes up his load this realm to leave, the beggar finds less cause than kings to grieve. The outward mark of a dervish is a patched garment and shaven head, but his essential qualities are a living heart and mortified passions. Stanza. Not at strife's door sits he, when thwarted, ne'er starts up to contest, all unmoved his soul. He is no saint who from the path would stir, though a huge stone should from a mountain roll. The dervish's course of life is spent in commemorating and thanking and serving and obeying God, and in beneficence and contentment, and in the acknowledgment of one God and in reliance on him, and in resignation and patience. Every one who is endued with these qualities is in fact a dervish, though dressed in a tunic, but a babbler who neglects prayer and is given to sensuality and the gratification of his appetite, who spends his days till nightfall in the pursuit of licentiousness, and passes his night till day returns in careless slumber, eats whatever is set before him, and says whatever comes uppermost, is a profligate, though he wear the habit of a dervish. Stanza. O thou, whose outer robe is falsehood, pride, while inwardly thou art to virtue dead, thy curtain of 7 colours put aside, while the inner house with mats is poorly spread. Footnote. It is customary in Persia to have a curtain at the portal of the house, the richness of which depends on the circumstances of the owner. End footnote. Story in verse. I saw some handfuls of the rose in bloom, with bands of grass suspended from a dome. I said, "What means this worthless grass, that it should in the rose's fairy circle sit?" Then wept the grass and said, "Be still, and know the kind their old associates ne'er forego. Mine is no beauty, hue or fragrance, true, but in the garden of the Lord I grew. His ancient servant I, reared by his bounty from the dust. Whate'er my quality, I'll in his favouring mercy trust. No stock of worth is mine, nor fund of worship, yet he will a means of help divine. When aid is past, he'll save me still. Those who have power to free, let their old slaves in freedom live, thou glorious Majesty. Me, too, thy ancient slave, forgive. Saadi, move thou to resignation's shrine. O man of God, the path of God be thine. Hapless is he who from this haven turns, all doors shall spurn him who this portal spurns. Story. I never complained of the vicissitudes of fortune, nor suffered my face to be overcast at the revolution of the heavens, except once, when my feet were bare, and I had not the means of obtaining shoes. I came to the chief mosque of Kufa in a state of much dejection, and saw there a man who had no feet. I returned thanks to God, and acknowledged his mercies, and endured my want of shoes with patience, and exclaimed. Stanza. Roast fowl to him that's sated will seem less upon the board than leaves of garden cress, while in the sight of helpless poverty boiled turnip will a roasted pullet be. Story. A merchant met with a loss of 1,000 dinars, and said to his son, Thou must not tell any one of this matter. The son replied, O father, it is thy command. I will not tell. Acquaint me, however, with the advantage to be derived from keeping the affair secret. The father answered, In order that we may not have two misfortunes to encounter, first, the loss of our money, and secondly, the malignant rejoicings of our neighbours. Couplet. Do not to foes thy sufferings impart, lest, while they seem to grieve, they joy at heart. Story. An intelligent young man, who possessed an ample stock of admirable accomplishments and a rare intellect, notwithstanding uttered not a word whenever he was seated in the company of the wise. At length his father said, O son, why dost not thou also say something of what thou knowest? He replied, I fear lest they should ask me something of which I am ignorant, and I should bring on myself disgrace. Stanza. One day a Sufi, hast thou heard it told, by chance was hammering nails into his shoe. Then of his sleeve an officer caught hold, and said, Come thou, and shoe my charger too. Couplet. Art silent? None can meddle with thee. When thou once hast spoken, thou must prove it then. Story. A man with a harsh voice was reading the Koran in a loud tone. A sage passed by and asked, What is thy monthly stipend? He replied, Nothing. Wherefore then, asked the sage, dost thou give thyself this trouble? He replied, I read for the sake of God. Then, said the sage, for God's sake, read not. Couplet. If in this fashion the Koran you read, you'll mar the loveliness of Islam's creed. Story. They asked Hassan Maimandi, How is it that, although Sultan Mahmud has so many handsome slaves, every one of whom is the wonder of the world and the marvel of the age, he has not such a regard or affection for any one as for Ayaz, who is not remarkable for beauty? He replied, Whatever pleases the heart appears fair to the eye. Distichs. The man for whom the Sultan shows esteem, though bad in every act, will virtuous seem. But whom the monarch pleases to reject, none of his retinue will e'er affect. Stanza. When with antipathy we eye a man, we see in Joseph's beauty want of grace, and, prepossessed, should we a demon scan, he'd seem a cherub with an angel's face. Story. They shut up a parrot in a cage with a crow. The parrot was distressed at the ugly appearance of the other, and said, What hateful form is this, and detested shape, and accursed face and unpolished manners? O crow of the desert, would that between me and thee were the space twixt east and west. Stanza. Should one at dawn arising thy face see, 'twould change to twilight gloom that morning's mirth. Such wretch as thou art should thy comrade be, but where could such a one be found on earth? But still more strangely the crow too was harassed to death by the society of the parrot, and was utterly chagrined by it. Reciting the deprecatory formula, There is no power nor strength but in God, it complained of its fate, and rubbing one upon the other the hands of vexation, it said, What evil fate is this, and unlucky destiny and fickleness of fortune. It would have been commensurate with my deserts to have walked proudly along with another crow on the wall of a garden. Couplet. 'Twill for a prison to the good suffice to herd them with the worthless sons of vice. What crime have I committed in punishment for which my fate has involved me in such a calamity, and imprisoned me with a conceited fool like this, at once worthless and fatuous? Stanza. Or would that wall with loathing fly which bore impressed thy effigy, and if thy lot in Eden fell, all others would make choice of hell. I have brought this example to show that how strong soever the disgust a wise man may feel for a fool regards with 100 times more aversion a wise man. Couplet. A pious man, mid dance and song, was seated with the gay. One of Balk's beauties saw him there, and marked the mirth decay. Do we then weary thee? He said, at least uncloud thy brow, for we too feel thy presence here is bitterness enow. Quatrain. This social band like roses is and lilies joined in one, and mid them thou, a withered stick, upspringest all alone. Like winter's cruel cold art thou, or like an adverse blast, thou sittest there like fallen snow, ice-bound and frozen fast. Story. A man had a beautiful wife, who died, and his wife's mother, a decrepit old woman, on account of the marriage settlement, took up her abode and fixed herself in his house. The man was vexed to death by her propinquity, yet he did not see how to get rid of her by reason of the settlement. Some of his friends came to inquire after him, and one of them said, How dost thou bear the loss of thy beloved one? He replied, The not seeing my wife is not so intolerable to me as the seeing her mother. Footnote. As he could not pay what he had covenanted to pay when he married, his wife's relations indemnified themselves by saddling him with the old lady, his wife's mother. End footnote. Distichs. The tree has lost its roses, but retains its thorn. The treasure's gone, the snake remains. 'Tis better on the lance point fixed to see one's eye, than to behold an enemy. 'Tis well 1,000 friendships to erase, could we thereby avoid our foeman's face. Footnote. It is a popular Oriental notion that treasures are guarded by serpents. End footnote. Story. I remember that in my youth I was passing along a street when I beheld a moon-faced beauty. The season was that of the month of July, when the fierce heat dried up the moisture of the mouth, and the scorching wind consumed the marrow of the bones. Through the weakness of human nature I was unable to support the power of the sun, and involuntarily took shelter under the shade of a wall, waiting to see if anyone would relieve me from the pain I suffered, owing to the ardour of the sun's rays, and cool my flame with water. All of a sudden, from the dark portico of a house, I beheld a bright form appear, of such beauty that the tongue of eloquence would fail in narrating her charms. She came forth as morn succeeding a dark night, or as the waters of life issuing from the gloom. She held in her hand a cup of snow water, in which she had mixed sugar and the juice of the grape. I know not whether she had perfumed it with her own roses, or distilled into it some drops from the bloom of her countenance. In short, I took the cup from her fair hand, and drained its contents, and received new life. The thirst of my heart cannot be slaked with a drop of water, nor if I should drink rivers would it be lessened. Stanza. Most blessed that happy one, whose gaze intense rests on such face at each successive morn. The drunk with wine at midnight may his sense regain, but not till the last day shall dawn will love's intoxication reach its bourne. Story. They told to one of the Arabian kings the story of Layli and Majnun, and of the insanity which happened to him, so that, although possessed of high qualities and perfect eloquence, he betook himself to the desert and abandoned the reins of choice. After commanding them to bring him into his presence, the king began to rebuke him, saying, "What defect hast thou seen in the nobleness of man's nature, that thou hast taken up the habits of an animal, and bidden adieu to the happiness of human society?" Majnun wept and said, Verse. Oft have my friends reproached me for my love, the day will come they'll see her and approve. Stanza. Would that those who seek to blame me could thy face, O fairest, see, theirs would then the loss and shame be, while amazed, intent on thee, they would wound their hands while they, careless with the orange, play. That the truth of the reality might testify to the appearance I claim for her. The king was inspired with a desire to behold her beauty, in order to know what sort of person it was who was the cause of such mischief. He commanded, and they sought for her, and searching through the Arab families found her, and brought her before the king in the court of the royal pavilion. The king surveyed her countenance, and beheld a person of a dark complexion and weak form. She appeared to him so contemptible that he thought the meanest of the servants of his harem superior to her in beauty and grace. Majnun acutely discerned his thoughts, and said, O king, it is requisite to survey the beauty of Laili from the window of the eye of Majnun, in order that the mystery of the spectacle may be revealed to you. Distichs. Unmoved with pity, thou me hearest complain. I need a comrade who can share my pain. The livelong day I'd then my woes recite. Wood with wood joined will ever burn more bright. Verse. What passed within the hearing of the grove, O forest leaves? Did ye but learn, ye'd mourn with me. My friends, tell him whom love has spared, I would he did but burn with lovers' flames, he'd then my grief discern. Verse. Scars may be laughed at by the sound, but to a fellow sufferer reveal thy anguish. Of the hornet's wound, what reck they who did never feel its sting? Till fortune shall bring round thy woes to thee, they will but seem the weak illusions of a dream. Do not my sufferings confound with those of others. Canst thou deem one holding salt can tell the pain of him who has salt rubbed upon his wounded limb? Story, in verse. A gallant youth there was, and fair, pledged to a maid beyond compare. They on the sea, as poets tell, together in a whirlpool fell. The boatman came, the youth to save, to snatch him from his watery grave. But, mid those billows of despair, he cried, my love is there, save her, oh, save, he said, and died. But with his parting breath he cried, not from that wretch love story hear, who love forgets when peril's near. Together thus these lovers died. Be told by him who love has tried, for Saadi knows each whim and freak of love, as well its ways can speak as Baghdad's dwellers Arabic. Hast thou a mistress? Her then prize, and on all others close thine eyes. Could Majnun and his Laili back return, they might love's story from this volume learn. End of section 3.